Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I am here today with Stephen Lovegrove. And if you guys are just tuning in today, this promises to be a real treat because Stephan is America's love coach. No, he's the life coach, but he is all about love. And with a name like Stephen Lovegrove, you have to imagine that it's quite a bit of love. And we're going to talk a lot today about scarcity mindset and self-esteem and all kinds of things that affect each and every one of us. So you're going to be sure to want to tune in today. So I just want to tell you a little bit more about Stephan. America's life coach, Stephen Lovegrove, is one of the fastest growing names in personal development. After a traumatic childhood as a gay child in a fundamentalist cult, Stephan restarted his life and created the life and business of his dreams. He is author of the international bestseller, How to Find Yourself, Love Yourself, and Be Yourself. The Secret Instruction Manual for Being Human. Stephan now supports entrepreneurs and entertainers in changing their lives from the inside out. From Billboard chart toppers to household name CEOs to national television stars, Stephan is the go-to coach for influential people and also just regular people who need something to shift and shift now. With over 100,000 fans globally on social media and repeatedly ranking as the #1 life coach on Instagram, Stephan is a profile media personality featured on CNN, NBC, Fox News, MTV, CBS, Inc., and USA Today, just to name a few. So without further ado, I hope you guys are getting ready to take some notes and tune in. I want to welcome Stephen to the Sisterhood of Sweat. Sorry, Stephan.
Good to be here. And I am a note taker myself. So shout out to anybody out there who is taking notes with us today.
So I really have to tell you, I'm so excited to have you on after listening to you on Hallmark channel and a few interviews that I saw live and diving into your book. You really have a lot of perceptions and wisdom for somebody so young, which tells me that you've probably been through a lot because that's where wisdom comes from.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. As you heard a little bit in the bio earlier, I grew up in a fundamentalist religious cult, and I always say it was a world really dominated by fear. I mean, we were taught to be afraid of everybody and everything, you name it, Hollywood, the media, Democrats, other Christians, other religions. I mean, you name it, we were supposed to be afraid of them. And so 18 years of my life happened in this world of fear. And of course, the thing that disrupted it for me was I was growing up in this world gay. And so I never fit into the box. And I thank God for that every day. It ended up being really the greatest blessing for me, because had I been able to fit into that black and white way of seeing the world, I don't know if I would have ever left. You know, I really don't. I might have just said, I'm going to conform. I'm going to do what I have to do to fit in. I'm going to make this work. But I was gay, and that was inescapable. And so 18 years old, I get kicked out of the house. I have to restart my life. And it did force me to grow up fast. And it forced me to figure out what I believed and what was real for me and what mattered to me in life at a very young age. And you know, at the time, I don't know that that fully felt like a gift, but I certainly look back on it and see it that way now. But, you know, I work with people of all ages, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. And at the end of the day, it is a perfect moment wherever you're at to decide that you want to start a new chapter in your life. So mine might have begun a little early, but whatever age you are, whatever moment you're in, it's always a good time to start a new chapter if you feel called.
So I know that I imagine it had to be really rough there for a bit and make you really question who you are and so many things. And also, I was reading that you got kicked out, you were at a Christian college, and you're kicked out of a federally funded job that you have, all because of who you are. So walk us through that, and how did you come through that to be who you are now?
Yeah, so I think the overarching message I was receiving from, the adults, the authorities in my life in that chapter was, who you are is wrong. And so I think this is the reason when people come to me and they don't feel good enough, they don't feel worthy, they have this crippling fear that deep down something is just wrong with them. I get it. Because that is the message I received. I mean, I've studied even this year more about the development of children's brains when it comes to abstract thinking and trauma and different things. And, you take someone, I'm 2 years old, I'm 3 years old, and I'm being told that most of the world is going to burn forever in hell. And certainly from a young age, I heard gay people are among them. And I'm 3 years old. My brain can't process that. My brain is little tiny, developing, can't do the thinking. But so all through my childhood, I hear these messages that who I am is wrong. And so, when I came out of the closet to my parents, it was a really rough experience. And that obviously happened privately. But then when I came out online publicly, there was a whole new wave of it. And I will never forget, I got called in for a meeting, and my boss at that job that you mentioned at the Christian college said to me, "You have now become a liability for the university." And I mean, you can just feel the energy of those words, to be told as a person that who you are is so problematic. You have become a liability for us. And so those are the kinds of messages I was receiving, that who I was evil, who I was an abomination, who I was a problem for people. And I obviously left all of those worlds and restarted. And I was just telling a friend the other day, I ended up at Winthrop University, which is my alma mater. I love Winthrop University. And shout out to all of my professors and bosses and fellow classmates there who were so loving and supportive. But it was the first time that I got to thrive in an environment that supported who I was rather than suppressed it. And I do think that set the stage for the work that I do today, Linda, because it is all about helping people discover who they are and bringing that forward. And I know from firsthand experience that that's where you really begin to thrive.
Yeah, I was reading that in your book, that you said that that was the first step, was who are you, and how do we find out who we really are?
Yeah, well, I think the glimpses have been there all along. They may not be obvious. For some of us, they are, but they may not be obvious. They may not be overt. But if you look at it, a lot of teachers I've heard over the years talk about it as a treasure map or a treasure hunt that you're going to go on in your own life, because often the glimpses, the hints, the nudges have been there all along. And so just to give you one example, obviously I'm doing a lot of television these days, and that's something that has been there for decades, from as long as I can remember. And I remember being a little kid, and I'd be at summer camp or day camp, and everybody would be playing capture the flag, and we're supposed to be playing this game. And I would go to this corner and hide out. And I went through different phases. Like, I had a live with, at the time, Regis and Kelly phase for a while, where that was my show. And then I had a phase where I liked weather and thought I was going to be a meteorologist. But the point is, I think about like little me on the side of the capture the flag field, practicing, giving the headlines or giving the weather. And I think those nudges have always been there for all of us. And typically what I find, Linda, is we don't listen. We don't pay attention. We don't honor those. And so a lot of the journey, I think, of figuring out who you are is going back to those and actually paying attention to the guidance within, instead of just writing it off as unrealistic or impossible or just a pipe dream and, moving on. But I think the guidance is there for all of us if we're willing to slow down and listen.
I love that. Now, when people are with other people that maybe are, your light is shining too bright, or like they're punishing you for being you, what is your suggestion to the individual in the situation? What should they do? Find more people that support them, disconnect from the relationship where they feel like they have to hide pieces of themselves? What would you tell people to do in that case?
Yeah, so I think I have a complex answer here, which is not as good of a soundbite, I recognize, but here's why my answer is complex. There's a lot of coaches in the space that I work in that will just say, kick them to the curb, right? You're tired of the spouse, kick them to the curb. You're having issues in a city, leave, move somewhere else, right? And listen, I have restarted my life multiple times. There's certainly power in switching jobs, switching cities, pushing the restart button. But the answer is not always just bail from everywhere and cancel everybody out of your life, right? I don't think that's always the simple answer. I think it's a couple of things. Number one, wherever you are, you can start to nurture your desires within yourself. So as maybe little and silly of an example as this is, me deciding to go host my own little TV show in the backyard in my treehouse every day was me inside of a cult that very much did not see who I was, appreciate who I was, respect who I was. Me choosing to nurture the desire in the way that I could anyway in that environment. And so I think anyone can begin to nurture the desires within yourself right where you are. Second of all, without having to completely remove people, you can, as you suggested, begin to put new people into your life, and especially with the internet. This used to be trickier, right? We used to go, you might have to go to a yoga studio, or you might have to go to a new place of worship, or it used to be you really had to go somewhere new. You can change up your social media feed starting today and put new voices, new people, new relationships into your life. So I think we can begin to do that. And then I think we can assess how we process the old relationships that don't fully align with who we are. There may be people that you want to say goodbye to and never look back. I'm not saying there's no one in that category, but I also, one of the things my coach always says is the hardest thing many people will ever do is change in front of somebody. And it is uncomfortable to change in front of somebody who knows the old you, but there are people who will stick with you on the journey. And so that's something it took me a while to learn. But again, a nuanced, long answer here, because I don't think the answer is just kick everybody out of your life. I think there are people who will go with you on the journey of change.
I love that. That's a great answer. You answered it perfectly. Now, how can we uncover the real and only effective way to our self-esteem without feeling selfish?
Yeah, well, first of all, as cliche as this principle is, personal growth, we really can't give something that we don't already possess, right? If I decide that today I would like to give you $100, well, if I don't possess $100, I don't have $100 to give you, right? We can't give something we don't already possess. And so I think, I know it's cliche, I know it's often overstated, and often I think self-love, self-care, self-esteem, I think these things often get associated with very superficial things like, bubble baths and nose jobs, and not what the discussion is really actually about, right? But self-esteem to me is about, how do you see yourself? What is your relationship to yourself? What do you believe about yourself? And I just believe that the relationship you have with yourself is your longest and your lifelong relationship. And so we might as well begin by investing in that relationship. something I share in the book, something I share in general. I love a mirror practice because it's so practical, it's so easy to implement, and we all find ourselves in the mirror, every day. At some point, I would hope you're looking in a mirror. And so there's so many different ways we can do it. I have looked at myself in the mirror and said, I love you, which is very powerful. I have looked at myself in the mirror and just met my reflection and looked in my eyes until I saw the love beneath the surface, beneath the skin, beneath the externals, really tapped in and felt the love there. I have looked in the mirror and declared a new story, a new truth about myself that I was working on believing. But all of it really comes down to, we're talking about your relationship with yourself and the fact that, to the extent that that is functioning and thriving, you really have something to give to the other people in your life.
That's perfect. I was talking to my husband earlier about some of the things that I was reading and listening to you say. And one of the things I liked was the story you told about how you changed around money. And I would love for you to tell the audience.
So I definitely have had a big change around money. I don't know if there's a specific story you want me to tell or just my overall journey with money. So let me make sure, because I want to give your audience the good stuff.
I think it's where you weren't having the flow of money and you were just stuck, and how you figured out the energy and the flow of how money, how it is an energy, and we can restrict its flow. I don't want to give your whole spiel, but
yeah. Well, so I was starting out in business, and here's the interesting thing on my journey of being a coach is there were two things I didn't really understand, that to be in business as a coach, I was going to have to learn and work with. One of those is a relationship to sales, right? I didn't realize, but any business owner out there, I know that if you're in business, you're in sales. It's inescapable. So there was the sales piece, but also just my relationship to money. And it really was, to put it nicely, a hot mess when things started out. And I didn't realize, but it quickly became apparent that without a good relationship to business, to money, business is really frustrating, and really life is very frustrating. And I know a lot of people resist this truth, but we do live on an economic planet. Money is a part of this planet. Money is a part of this reality. If you don't have a good relationship with money, it probably is going to be a pain point for the rest of your life, because it's an inescapable part of life, right? And so there was a moment, and it was in the first full year of my business, and things were just not good on a money front, which of course made living at peace more difficult, made living in purpose more difficult, all of that stuff. And there was a very dark night where I came home and there was an eviction notice on my door. And I remember I came into the living room and it was dark and I hadn't turned on the lights yet. And I just remember I got on the living room floor and I cried. And I was like, this is not working. And here's the thing that I want to say about this moment before I finish the story is, I knew that I had an important purpose and a calling and a message. And I never wondered about that. But I knew that things had to change with my relationship with money. And so I want to say to people, if you feel like you're still struggling with the money stuff, with your relationship to money, with sales, any of these things, please don't give up on your purpose and your calling and the message you have to share with the world, because we need your gifts. We need your contribution. And please don't give up because you're struggling in your relationship with money. And that's exactly where I was. And I just remember realizing, if all things are energy, which I knew at the time, and continually I find myself with more money going out than coming in, something is energetically off. And that was the biggest breakthrough. And I dived into this area, and starting that year, I did so much work around this area because I realized there is an energetic dynamic at play when more money is always going out than being replenished. And on the flip side, there is an energetic dynamic at play when more money is coming in than going out. And obviously that's where I wanted to end up. And so I said, whatever it takes, I'm going to figure out how to get into the flow once and for all, because I just didn't want to live. And this is really the final thing that I'll say here. I really believed that it was not, whatever you believe in, the will of God, the will of love, the will of the universe, it was not the plan for me to be sitting around worrying about money for the rest of my life. And so I just believed we had to figure this out, because I had to get about the business of my purpose. And my purpose was not to spend my life worrying about money.
And I loved how you said that you were working so hard, and it isn't just about that work. Why isn't it just about the work that we're doing?
Yeah, well, this is an important point I always make. Many of us were taught as a kid, working hard equals a lot of money, right? And unfortunately, we all have examples, and I could name so many, but I'll stay away from naming any public figures, and you can just fill in the blanks in your own mind with your own examples. But we all know examples of people that really are not. So two things. One, people that really are not good people, right? That's another thing. We like to believe good people are rewarded in life. And yet we all know people, they're not good people, but they have a lot of money. Or it doesn't seem like they work much. They have a lot of money. And so that messes up the equation that most of us have been taught to believe, that being a good person will get us money, or that working hard will somehow get us money. Well, I always say I've never worked harder than I did at the minimum wage fast food job that was just truly the hardest thing I've ever done. And I have so much respect for people in fields where you're very underpaid and undervalued, but my God, do you work so hard? That was me. I've never worked harder than in that job, and yet I've never been paid less. And so we have to get to a better equation. And ultimately what I started to realize is there are laws here, and laws that money follows. And I like to say the law is the law is the law. It does not care whether you watch Real Housewives or, inspirational documentaries. The law works across the board. And so the people for whom money is working, they may not be good people. They may not be working hard. Who knows? But the people for whom money is working, they're working with the laws. And that's what I ultimately came to discover.
And also what I was really loving, that you made this analogy when I listened to your interview. You said that you were needy around the money, like I need it. And it was like this desperation kind of thing. And that it actually repels money, just like it does relationships. And I would love for you to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I remember reading a book in 2016 by a man named Victor Bach, and it was the first time I had ever heard this concept, or this term, of the law of repulsion. And it actually became a cornerstone principle for me that changed the game on money, because in the world of personal growth, there is so much talk around law of attraction. And I bet there's a lot of people listening today who are wondering, man, I feel like I've done so much to try to attract this thing into my life, whatever that thing is for you. And why is it still not in my life? How is it still not in my life after I've done all this work? And what I realized is my problem was not an issue of attraction as much as it was an issue of repelling. I was so needy. I was so in fear. I was so desperate for money that I was actually repelling it out of my life. And I think this is something I would challenge everybody to look at. Even Oprah, when you hear, I heard a recent interview she did, I think last year, where she was asked about vision boards and does she still do them? How does she use them now? And I thought this was so insightful. She said, you actually can want something so badly and be so attached to it that it backfires on you. And it takes some time to learn that lesson, but repulsion is a very real thing. And if any of you out there listening or watching today have reached a point where you want it so badly it hurts, it might be time to take a step back, let it go, even temporarily, and get back to a place of wholeness, get back to a place of joy, get back to a place of peace, because ultimately that repulsion energy does start to work against you, and it cancels out any attraction.
Wow, that is so good. So good. And I know we've all been a little bit needy at times in our lives. What do you think that neediness was stemming from?
Well, I'll tell you what it was for me specifically on money, but I think the principle applies across the board to any area. Typically, when we need something, there's something that we feel we need energetically or emotionally that's deeper than the tangible thing. So I would have told you I needed money, right? And sure, again, I said it's an economic planet. We need money to live in this human experience as our planet operates. But there were a lot of deeper things than that, because I needed validation at the time that I was a good coach. I don't feel that way now, but this was year one of my business. I desperately needed validation that I was a good coach. I needed validation that I wasn't crazy for trying to make this work and not go get a job like my mom suggested. I needed validation that I could really succeed. Plus, I needed a sense of safety and security, that I was going to be okay, that things weren't going to fall apart. I needed to know that I wasn't a failure, or all of these things, right? And so
Yeah.
when you have all of that riding on something, it's easy to understand how the repulsion accidentally starts to take effect, because it's just too heavy. The energy, the best way I can say it is the energy becomes so heavy, so stuck, so dense, because you're making it mean all sorts of things and you need it for all sorts of reasons. And it just can't flow when you're in that zone.
And I could so relate, because this all ties back to what you were talking about earlier about being made to feel like being you was wrong. Because I equally felt like that growing up,
Mm.
and would get, I wanted to run around barefoot. I would literally get a spanking for taking my shoes off and running around barefooted, and many other things that were completely uniquely me. And so I found myself later in life seeking validation outside of myself. And I think that validation is to prove that you're okay, that, that it's okay to be yourself. But really, truly, that validation only comes from within.
Yeah, one of my biggest principles is that we can only live from the inside out. And we really can only change our lives from the inside out. And this was very clear to me. So I live in Los Angeles. Obviously, this is a backdrop. I don't think that fooled anyone, but I am coming to you also from Los Angeles today. And it's funny because LA is such an example of, if we lived from the outside in, LA should be full of people who have no problems, right? I mean, we
Right.
have anywhere from 10 to $50 million homes. We have more luxury cars than I've ever seen in my life. I've seen in the last 5 years in LA. Um, I mean, you name it, right? The very best fitness classes, the very best plastic surgeons, the very best interior designers, everything, the very best money can buy of anything in the city. And yet, people struggle, people are depressed, people are going through hard times, people are not happy, people are unfulfilled, all the human issues, all the things people go through, which tells me obviously that happens because we don't live from the outside in. It's not like as long as you live on a beautiful estate, all everything taken care of. You still have to live within your mind, within your consciousness, within your energy. And so I'm just very passionate about living from the inside out. And when it comes to those of us who have picked up a harmful story along the way, I think one of the most damaging things that we can try to do is repair or replace that story by proving something, right? If I get in a relationship, that will prove that I am lovable. If I make a certain amount of money, that will prove, mom and dad, that I'm successful, right? And we try to disprove the old story and replace it, not by doing inner work, but by validating it with something on the outside. And I certainly know this as a gay man. You know, a lot of gay men were in their own way told who you are is wrong. And so we try to fix it by, maybe if I have a perfect body, maybe if I have a great taste for design, maybe if I go out there and I make a lot of money, I will fix this story that says that there's something wrong with me. And I just found over the years, you have to fix the story from within. And you totally can, by the way. You can replace the story. You don't have to carry the baggage with you for the rest of your life. But just understand, you fix the story from the inside out, doing that inner work. You don't fix it by validating stuff on the outside. And that's the equation where people just get stuck, and it's an endless cycle.
Yeah, happiness is an inside job. And working on fixing the story, and just basically realizing that you are seeking to prove, and why are you seeking to prove?
Yeah, and realizing that any story, if you tell it to yourself enough times over and over and over again, especially with a lot of feelings behind it, with memories behind it, with life experiences behind it, eventually you get to a point where the story feels true. And so, for everybody listening and watching today, there are stories that feel true to you. And you have evidence, and you could point it, and you could say, but Linda, but Stephan, I have evidence upon evidence upon evidence that this story is true. And of course you do. That's why you believe it. And the more you believe it, the more you create evidence for it. But what I want to suggest is you could also choose a new story today. And you might not have a lot of evidence for the news story yet, but you could choose it. You could, at the very least, try it on. You could experiment with it, as I often invite clients to do. And the more you live in a news story, the more you open the pathways to create something new. So we've got to get to a point where we can overcome. I have all this evidence for the old story, but are you open to try something new?
Love that so much. Now, we have to start showing up for ourselves. And I love how you decided you were going to be America's life coach, and you started showing up every day 3 times live, right? Like 1,000 times. What was that whole journey like to bring you to where you are right now?
So I felt the words, the phrase, the energy of America's life coach one day, all the way back in 2015. And the first time it crossed my mind, honest to God, my thought was, that's too big. That's too much. Like, who are you to claim that? You know what I mean? I did not immediately go for it. It was actually, to my best recollection, somewhere around 8.5, 9 months of sitting with it before I ever put it out into the world. And even when I put it out, I was still a little scared. I was still a little hesitant. I said, if you're declaring this to the world, you really better be sure that this is what you want to own, because people are going to be watching. People might judge this. People might not know what to think. All of that. Like, I was aware of all of that. But after sitting with it for over half a year, I realized, no, I really do think this is who I'm supposed to be. I really do think this is what I'm supposed to step into. And so I put it out there. And as you said, in that first year of it, I made a commitment to myself that every day I was going to show up 3 times online as America's life coach, no matter what. And I didn't know what it was going to lead to for sure, but my thought process was, if I show up as America's life coach 3 times a day for an entire year, as you said, that will be over 1,000 times of showing up in this new identity. And so I did. And I started doing that. And 1 year later, I had a full roster of clients. I had filled it twice. I had raised my prices, I think at least once in that year. I had hit a wait list twice. It was an incredibly different point that I found myself at, a year later. But, here we are 5 years later. And I just want to acknowledge, someone messaged me the other day and it moved me so much. They messaged me and they said, I remember you friended me on Facebook years ago. And I will never forget getting the request and seeing it come through. And I was like, who is this that is declaring themselves America's life coach? And he said, I have to say, I have followed along on the journey ever since. And I was so proud seeing you on Hallmark this week. But I have to say, you really did live into it. And you really are America's life coach, and hats off to you. And I was like, well, hats off to you for sticking with me for this wild ride of years. But the point is, it has been a journey, and it did all start with the decision of, I'm going to show up for myself and show up consistently.
Yeah, and do the work. And I love how you showed up as you wanted to be. Like you have to somewhat, if there's something, a dream, a vision, a goal, I really think future gratitude, like we do in our group, Be Connected Collective, is really key because you're seeing it. You're seeing who you're going to be with, you're grateful for the future, and you're kind of speaking, I think, into existence. And then you begin, when you start taking on that dream and start living it like it actually is, I think you're so much closer to achieving it.
Yeah, and the thing I want people to know is it's not about fake it till you make it, right? That's very important to me. I didn't just slap on some impressive words and let's fake it till we make it. That's not the idea. I really asked myself, who do I need to become to be America's life coach? And that is a question I would really leave people with today is for the desires, for the dream, for the vision that is in your heart. Who is the person that lives in that vision? And who do you need to become? Who would you be being right now if you were that person? These are the kinds of questions we need to be asking because it's not about fake it till you make it. It's a journey of identity. It's a journey of embodying. It's a journey of becoming. And today it is the most in integrity thing. But, I just stood on Hallmark and said on the official account, I'm America's life coach, Stephen Lovegrove, and I'll see you on Hallmark Channel, right? But it's a journey of becoming. And when I didn't have the evidence yet, I chose to become it. I chose to create it from within. And that really is what the journey is all about for me.
And it made you ready for it, because many times we want something that we're not quite ready for, but doing the 1,000, showing up 1,000 times and then coaching all of the people gave you this vast well of experience to draw from. So by stepping into who you want to be, you're preparing yourself to be it.
Yeah. I found myself telling a client last week, I don't think Hallmark happened a moment too late. And not a moment too soon, not a moment too late. You know what I mean?
Like
It
perfect
felt,
timing.
it felt just divinely perfect that I was showing up to this moment of destiny, not the only moment of destiny, but a moment of destiny that I was showing up there right on schedule. And yeah, you just got to move forward. I mean, I talked about this. We're both in a program together, and one of the things for media, and one of the things that I've learned is that sometimes you have to do things that are not glamorous on the way to where you're going. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
And
listen, it
realize it's
wasn't,
experience.
yes. And I told the story the other day. I remember when I was finishing my internship, technically the last year of college, and I had started to Periscope. I wasn't in my year of 1,000 yet, but I remember I would have these crazy weird hour shifts, and I would sit in the parking lot at 4 a.m. and Periscope would just blast your videos to random people globally. I would sit in the parking lot at 4 a.m. and I would go live. And if 7 people showed up, I would inspire the 7 that showed up. And I just look back on that and I'm like, you were, one of my fitness coaches, Angela Davis, always says, you're putting in a deposit because you never know when you'll want to draw something later from the account, make a withdrawal. And I just think about all the deposits I made in myself, in my vision, in my dreams. I made a lot of deposits that nobody saw, that were behind the scenes, that didn't look glamorous, that didn't look like the dream come true. But when it came time, you're right, I was ready. And I stood in the moment, not a moment too soon, not a moment too late. And I was like, here I am. So we've got to make the deposits. I'm still making deposits in where I want to go. You know what I mean? And I hope we all are making deposits, making investments, putting in the sweat, metaphorically or literally, to where you want to be,
And I know you said earlier about when you said what your dream was, it felt so big. And I remember having that exact same moment. thinking, I can't say that, I can't put that out there, that's too big. And that's how you really know that that's the dream. It should feel like, oh, it's so big, but really in reality,
Yeah.
that's the dream.
Well, the thing about it is, the universe is always trying to get you to evolve, trying to get you to expand. So, if this current version of you could live in the dream, it wouldn't be your evolution. It wouldn't be your growth. It wouldn't be your expansion. If this version of you could have produced that, you would have already done it. And so to me, that is the whole point of the journey, is who I became to be the person who could stand in the middle of my TV dreams in the way I have this year. And by the way, I'm just getting started, so stay tuned. But to become the person who could stand and sit in that dream, that was the journey. Because you're right. And the version of me 5 years ago couldn't have done that. And the point of our dreams is to move us forward, is to expand us, is to transform us. And again, who do you need to become is always such a powerful question, I think.
Dreams are expansive. They're not restrictive, they're expansive. And I love that. And I love also, as I was reading in the book, you talk about scarcity mindset. And I think, well, I was in a competition kind of mode. We did fitness, bikini, Spartan races. And I think sometimes people can think from the mindset of lack. How can we get out of that mindset? If you win, I have less. How can we get in the mindset of prosperity, of being generous and giving and realizing there's more to go around?
Yeah. So the thing about scarcity, I know Brene Brown talks about one of the defining stories that most of us live in without even realizing it is the not enough story. And I always think about this example that I believe she gives where, we even wake up in the morning and our very first thought is, I didn't get enough sleep. I'm so tired, right? We're literally starting the day from a story of not enough. And that is the story of our time. And you hear people say this, never enough time, never enough energy, never enough money. Right. And interestingly enough, my coach talks about those are three resources. I didn't even realize that, but time, money, energy, the three resources we have, and we are trained to believe that we never have enough of them. Right. And I think it takes a pattern interrupt where we very deliberately choose a new story, or else we probably are going to default to that because that's what we were all handed by society. That's what we were all been taught, since growing up. And so to me, the story is, there is more than enough for all of us. And I love that you brought up the competition thing. I am definitely competitive by nature. So all my competitive people out there, I understand. I get you. But I remember specifically in Hollywood hearing Chelsea Handler say, we've got to realize that we don't have to see everybody else who works in this business as competition, that there's actually room for all of us. And it is one of the, one of my favorite spiritual texts says the way of love is not necessarily difficult, but it is different. I don't believe it has to be difficult to live in these paradigms, but it is different. It is different than what most of us are taught, but we have this choice available to us. And I love working with paradigms where there's more than enough for everyone and there's room for everyone. There's room for everyone at the top. There's room for everyone to succeed. There's room for everyone to thrive. And it is a whole new way of thinking. It is whole new systems of belief and of thought. So it takes some work to get ourselves there.
I think so. Yeah. Because we grew up in this world where we thought it was kind of dog eat dog, right? People are clamoring over each other to get this promotion or this accolade. And I think sometimes if you just realize that what is yours, if you're doing what your work, it's going to come to you. It's going to come to you.
Yeah. And I guess, well, I'll say it practically and then I'll say it a little bit woo-woo. On the most practical level, what we're saying here is nobody has to lose for you to win. And my God, if life doesn't get a whole lot more beautiful when we realize that, because I think a lot of us have been trained to think somebody else has to lose, somebody else will end up suffering, somebody else will end up beneath me. That is the only way that I can come out on top. And that's such a brutal, violent, yucky energy to live in, ultimately.
It's kind of an envious type of energy in a way.
Well, because here's the thing, you end up rooting for somebody else to not
lose.
do well, which is a
Yes.
bad energy to be in.
It
And so
is.
now let
It's
me
a
say it
bad
in the
energy.
it is. And let
Yeah.
me say it in the woo-woo way now. If you just close your eyes for a second and remember that who you are at the deepest level is not your body, is not your five senses. We know there's people who don't even have access, sadly, to all their five senses, and they're still just as alive. So who you are is deeper than the physical. It's deeper than the body. It's deeper than the five senses. Who you are really does exist in consciousness. And so if you just go there for a moment, of course, within consciousness, all of it is yours. And you can feel with your eyes closed, just connecting to your consciousness. It's all yours. It's all available. It's all been given to you. And it's just consciousness. So in this state, there's not a fight. There's not a struggle. There's not a war. There's not a battle. There's not a competition for your good. You just get to choose what you want to experience in consciousness. And if you choose to experience struggle, so be it. But if you choose to experience prosperity, so be it. And no one and nothing can stop your good if you choose it in consciousness. And so I'm going to open my eyes and come back. But that's how I wanted to say it in the woo-woo sense, is when you remember that the deepest level of reality is consciousness, and when you go there in consciousness, there is no competition there and there is no lack there. You get to choose what you want to experience, and you get to experience it every time.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect segue. That was brilliant. I loved it. And you took me along on that journey. And I think everybody is going to really appreciate all that you had to bring today to this interview. I just want to acknowledge you so much for really standing in your truth and breaking away from the things that may have easily held you back, to step into being America's life coach. And thank you so much for coming on today. Where can everybody get your book and the name of it again?
Yeah, the name of the book is How to Find Yourself, Love Yourself, and Be Yourself. It is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. And you can find me online at stephanlovegrove.com. Everything's there, the book, the links, the socials, they're all there.
So great. So great. Thank you so much. And everybody, just give him some love and let him know how much you enjoyed this episode, and reach out to him on social media. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening.